Oh, as chair of East Washington County Democrats, this is our normal meeting time, and it's so exciting to join with so many others to host this event. When I heard that Oregon was the only Democratic, totally blue state in the nation which had a new congressional seat, I was excited to see what happened with redistricting. And then when I found out that we were being redistricted to a new seat, it was doubly exciting. So there's a really great privilege in being able to be together with you tonight and meet the candidates. I'd like to thank Marion County and Washington County Democrats, Washington County HD 25 and 37, Wilsonville Democrats, and a host of others for joining us in this meeting. And welcome all of the people who are here. I'm going to turn it over to Carol Fisher, who is the new field consultant for Washington County Democrats and the House District Leader for the new House District 25, and let him take it from there. Carol, welcome.
Thank you, Carol. Thank you all for coming this evening. I have the great honor of introducing Dr. Ed Dover, now a retired professor of political science, but still a professor to so many people in this state and across the country. One of the reasons that I chose to go to Western Oregon University was because the faculty there had not only the experience of the research and everything, you know, the teaching credentials, but they had practical real world experiences. They put politics into action. And this is a perfect opportunity for Dr. Dover, as he himself is a former congressional candidate. So I'd like to hand it over to him, and he will moderate our debate this evening.
Thank you, Carl. I would like to welcome all of our viewers to this evening of this debate. We are having Congressional District number 6, which is a new district, and the Democratic Party is very fortunate to have such an array of good candidates. We have 7 excellent and very qualified people here asking for your vote in the primary election. And so we are going to be having a debate. I'd like to go over a few of the rules. Because we have such a large number of people, we're not going to be able to have them speak too long. We are going to have 8 questions, which I will ask, and each candidate will be given 90 seconds to answer them. As for the order, we're trying to rotate this around so that everyone gets an opportunity to be the first one to answer, or the second and the third. So we've rotated them around quite a bit. Every person will have at least an opportunity to answer one question, and everybody else will be in a different position. Somebody will be in second, third, fourth, and fifth, and sixth, and seventh for the first 7 questions, trying to balance these out. So with that in mind, I would like to introduce the candidates to you. And we'll begin with Teresa Alonzo Leon, who is a state representative. Carrick Flynn, policy advisor. Kathleen Harder, medical doctor. Cody Reynolds, investor. Andrea Salinas, state representative.
Good evening.
When? Did I? Oh, anyway, Loretta Smith, former county commissioner, and Matt West, engineer. With this in mind, I'd like to begin with the first question, and this is going to go to Teresa. And I'll read the question, and then we'll have the answers. It's about immigration. America is often defined as a nation of immigrants, yet few people believe our immigration system works well. Part of that disagreement is over values, whether to have more or fewer immigrants, and of what kinds of people we prefer. What values should guide the nation in revising our immigration laws, and what changes would you advance?
Well, that's a 90 seconds, huh?
Yeah, 90 seconds.
As the daughter of immigrants myself, I came to this country when I was 4 years old. Coming to this country was a dream come true for our family. We traveled many miles from the state of Michoacan, Mexico. And my parents and I worked in the fields, to help our family get by. And for me, we do have a we have a system that doesn't work for everybody. I was blessed to have been able to become a citizen because of Ronald Reagan's amnesty in the 1986. But we have a lot of amazing people who would be eligible, but definitely our immigration system needs a lot of work. I think every administration has tried to fix it, has tried to make sure it worked, but we do have amazing people who are DACA students, and my appreciation for Barack Obama, our former president, who was able to instill some of these opportunities for people. We need to work on this. This is definitely an important issue that we will need to tackle, when I become a congressional leader, because we have a lot of people in this country right now who contribute to our communities and strengthen our economy, for that matter, and are on a waiting list to become citizens, or our process is expensive and complicated, and we need to really streamline our systems to ensure that the people who have lived here and have provided to our communities are eligible to become citizens. Thank you.
Okay, we'll hear from Karen.
Can I interrupt just one quick moment? Apparently our timer is not showing up on the screen. Do folks see something called Blue Sky Timer?
I see it, but I don't see a time on it.
Timer isn't showing on it for some reason.
Okay, let me log out of it real quick and log back
We have
in.
no.
Sorry about that. I hit the timer and it did not start going. Should show up in the waiting room.
Carol, I can go ahead and do a timer on my iPhone if that isn't going
It
to
says it's entering the room right now.
Okay.
But it's in and there's still no video, it looks like.
Yeah. Well, for everyone joining us, it worked beautifully today.
Well, should we continue?
Yes.
I think we need to go on. I will just try to do a timer, and if you don't hear it, I'll let you know when you're at 90 seconds.
Okay.
Okay, Carrie, go ahead.
Thank you very much. First, I want to say I thought Teresa's answer was fantastic. But there's some real absurdities in how we interact with the immigration system. So for example, because of my ancestry, I'm entitled to Irish citizenship and an Irish passport. Not Irish, didn't grow up in Ireland, don't really know much about the culture, I've never lived there. I can have the passport and I can have the citizenship. Now you look at dreamers who live in America, grew up in America, know the culture, are part of the culture, and they don't have a passport or citizenship. So am I more Irish than a dreamer is American? This is absurd. And this is not how anything works in real life, and the law does need to catch up with this. It's also heartbreaking to see how we've been treating people at the border, especially in recent years. America needs to be the kind and compassionate place that we tell ourselves we are, and the type of country where people from all over the world want to come. And for that, we do need comprehensive immigration reform, and we need it to be more humane and we need a path to citizenship. Congress needs to do its job. It's said it's going to do this for, I think, decades now, but it needs to stop talking and start doing.
Okay, thank you. Andrew Salinas, we'll hear from you next.
Thank you. So as the daughter of a Mexican immigrant myself, I know how hard my family worked to make its way to the middle class. And really my dad's only way to get citizenship status back in the early 70s was to go to Vietnam. And so after 2 tours, he got his citizenship status that way. Right now we have 11 million immigrants in this country who are working and living and going to school and really do need that path to citizenship. When I was the lead champion on the farm worker overtime bill to provide overtime pay to farm workers after 40 hours, which we just passed this last session, I heard from growers right here in the 6th Congressional District that they need more workers. We have a worker shortage right now, which is why Oregon has to pay some of the highest wages in the nation. But it isn't just Oregon, it's across this nation that we need more workers. We need to reform our H-2A and H-1B visa system. We need to make sure that the workers that are here now and the students that are here now and have been living here get that path to citizenship. And then we have to reform these visa systems because those are not working either for the employers or for the workers who come here. So there are a number of different ways and a number of different solutions that we need to tackle. And Congress does need to tackle it sooner rather than later. And we need to start by revising the Fair Labor Standards Act so that when workers do come here, they do the same types of wages and work under the same labor laws that other U.S. citizens do as well.
Thank you. Cody, we'll hear from you.
I mean, I'll echo some of the sentiments of my opponents. You know, we need a clear path to citizenship for those people who want to come to this country. We are that shining light on the hill, and so many people want to come and contribute in our society. They're coming here to educate themselves. You know, I think we need to especially be targeting and encouraging those people who come here and train as engineers and doctors and scientists to stay here. Give them a clear path, you know, and those children who were brought here, you know, as children and have lived here their entire lives, they clearly need to stay here. And then, you know, going back to, you know, Teresa and Andrea's stories, you know, the farm workers who power our agrarian economy here in Oregon, we need to bring them into the fold and make sure that they are benefiting from those services and programs that we as citizens enjoy. You know, we can't let them stand on the outside looking in forever. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Loretta, we'll hear from you now.
Thank you. As a staffer to Senator Wyden, I worked on immigration casework and immigration policy, and I saw firsthand the inequities of our immigration system. And just to be clear, we have about 10.5 to 12 million undocumented folks here, but only 1.9 are from Mexico. And if you look at the news, it would lead you to believe that everybody who's coming over the border are from Mexico. And so we need to clear that up. That's not true. A lot of folks who come here from Europe, they come here on a passport and they never return. They just don't go back. We don't pay attention because they meld into the community. And what I saw was that the quickest way to get over here is to come over here on a student visa. But the hardest way to come here is to immigrate if you have a family member. And we need to reform our system so that families can be reunited quicker. We need to make sure that humanitarian parole and refugee status does not take you so long to get. At our borders right now, Section 42 is being talked about, taken off the table, because it's a public health issue to have folks at the border and not put them anywhere. It is also inhumane. Also, as a staffer, I am the only person who has drafted and passed a private relief bill for an immigrant who was fleeing persecution and for domestic violence. We need to have other pathways so people can come in and they can stay and have a life, because they're paying into our Social Security system and they're not getting anything back. They're increasing and expanding our monies in the Social Security Trust Fund. So we need to do a better job, and we need to have comprehensive healthcare reform, not healthcare, but immigration reform now.
I'm up.
Okay. We'll go on. Next we'll hear from Matt.
This is a great question. Our system is fundamentally broken as it currently stands and often forgets the humanity of all those who are seeking citizenship in the United States. Border crossings themselves absolutely should not be illegal. It should not be illegal to try to improve your life. What we saw from the last administration and their attacks on refugee status with their wait in Mexico policy was absolutely atrocious. And we need to work significantly harder and faster to ensure that we can get a pathway to citizenship for all those people who are in our country right now. We need to expand legal immigration. And as Loretta said, many people who are currently considered illegal immigrants are people who have overstayed their visas, which means we need to undo a lot of that racist language that we currently use whenever we talk about illegal immigration. Lastly, we need to expand legal immigration, and we need to abolish ICE. ICE itself and the way that it's operating is fundamentally abhorrent, and people themselves should not be considered legal or illegal. We need to be able to treat everyone like the humans that they are, respect their refugee rights, and work towards creating a system that actually makes sense and isn't based on some weird per country metric that we currently have.
Thank you. And Kathleen, you take it next.
Thank you, Ed. I'll echo a lot of the sentiments that we've already heard. We are stronger as a country because of our diversity. That is very clear. Our immigrant workers provide tremendous benefit to our economy. And we need to have a clear path to citizenship, as everyone has said. We have to streamline the process so people are not waiting in perpetuity to receive their citizenship. And we certainly cannot separate families at the borders that has happened in previous administrations. We need our resources to go to working on those policies, not to building walls. So that's what we need to be working on, and we have to do this in a much more deliberate fashion than we have before. We're going to see a lot of people now that are going to try to come to the US because of the changes with the pandemic and some of the restrictions that were placed. So this needs to be a priority to process these people in a humane and expedited fashion.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to the second question, and Cody Riddles will lead this one off. This is a question about representation. District 6 has a diverse population where urban, suburban, small town, and rural voters differ over racial, ethnic, gender, cultural, religious, ideological, and economic factors. Rather than telling everyone that you support everything for which they ask, how would you represent a diverse district while advancing the core values that define your candidacy and tenure in office?
Thank you for the question. I ran for Congress the first time 10 years ago, and I realized then a couple of things. One, it takes money to win elections, and two, that Oregon was changing demographically. So I set my sights on this seat in 2022, knowing that with the 2020 census, we'd be picking it up. And for the last 10 years, I've been building the wealth that I need to run this race the way I want to run it, and that's what I'm doing. But during that time, in addition to making the money I needed, I went and I learned Spanish, because it's important to be able to talk to people in the language that they know and that they speak in their daily lives. And I grew up rural. I grew up poor. I can relate to anyone because I have worked and served in the military with people from all backgrounds, and it wasn't a political thing. It was a us thing. It was a we thing. It was a mission-oriented let's solve this problem thing. And I think that's what we need to get back to in our political system, is solving problems together, identifying and agreeing on the problem, and then taking small bites out of it until it's no longer there.
Thank you. We'll hear from Loretta Smith next.
Can you repeat the question, please?
Yes. District 6 has a diverse population where urban, suburban, small town, and rural voters differ over racial, ethnic, gender, cultural, religious, ideological, and economic factors. Rather than telling everyone that you support everything for which they ask, how would you represent a diverse district while advancing the core values that define your candidacy and tenure in office?
Yes, I do believe that representation matters. I think it's very important that you have a diverse federal delegation that represents what the census has. And what we know is that this region is a lot more diverse than it was 10 years ago. And as a county commissioner who had a very diverse district, and we had farmers, we had folks who are small business people, we had different nationalities in our county. But one thing is for sure, when I worked for Senator Wyden for 14 years in the Senate, we touched every corner of Oregon. Ranchers, farmers, small business people, rural, urban folks. So I'm very much aware of how to work with different folks from different demographics. If you look at my track record, I spent a lot of time reaching out to individuals who were in BIPOC communities to make sure that they had voices. I always try to protect older adults to make sure that government was at their front door. And I plan to continue to do some of that same work. While we do have a nice urban piece, about 60%, 40% of this district is rural. So you have to meet people where they are and talk about the things that are concerning, whether it be wildfires, drought, how do you get small business loans? How do we make sure that those county payments that are so important to local government, that we continue to get those federal county payments in? That is a priority, and that's what I plan to do as a commissioner, not as a commissioner, but as a congresswoman.
We'll hear from Matt. We'll hear from Matt, I guess I should say that.
Sorry, there was some reverb. I didn't know that it was, I couldn't make that out. That is a great question. And I fundamentally agree with Loretta that we do need a Congress that is diverse in order to represent such a diverse group of people. This country has a long history of racial injustice. The roots of it, which are the original sin of this country, have yet to be fully addressed. I do know that I'm a white man. I've not lived that same experience of the racial minorities in this country. But what I do know is I have benefited from institutions that have not benefited many of my fellow Americans. I know there's a lot of work to be done in this regard. I see my and when I think about what part of my background speaks to representing this district, it's my intention to bring a scientific understanding to solving climate change and not let wealthy people stop us in the way.
I think we need a technical break here because I think we have a problem.
Are other people on okay? Is it just Matt that we lost?
Wait, did you guys not hear me?
We lost you at the tail end, Matt.
We lost you for a few minutes.
Oh, okay.
I think we're almost done.
I don't know where we left off. So I suppose closing statement on that aspect is we do need true restorative justice. We must pass Representative Sheila Jackson Lee's bill to study reparations. Some form of reparations need to be passed in order to address real restorative justice and real healing.
Okay, thank you. Kathleen, you're next.
Thanks, Ed. I got to say, the way that I approach this is the people in this district are my neighbors. I'm the only one in this group that has lived and worked and raised a child in this district. I've taken care of thousands of these people who live here as my patients for the last years. I've been involved in the community. I understand these people, and I listen to their trials and tribulations every day. I understand their challenges. I've been a small business owner the majority of my life. I get what it's like to be the last one in the office to get paid. I understand the challenges that our district is facing. And because of that ability to understand, I really believe I'm the best one to represent this group. I will, and I do it every day when I talk to patients, I find out where they are, I meet them where they are, and we find out what we can do to work together to work on shared goals, to get people healthier, to help them figure out how they're going to pay for their prescriptions. That's the sort of thing that you need, someone who can meet somebody halfway, regardless of what their background is, and work together towards pragmatic solutions. We have some really big problems ahead of us that we have to work on together, and I'm the best one to get there.
Thank you. Our next response will come from Andrea Salinas.
Thank you, Dr. Dover. So yeah, I think it's about delivering for Oregonians in this district and understanding what their needs are and where that common ground is. You know, I think Oregonians, no matter what piece of the district you're talking about, are really concerned about climate and the devastation that we're seeing here with, you know, the wildfires, drought, and ice storms. And it's constant now. And I think this is something that I have a track record of really pushing on. I was instrumental in passing our first clean fuels program to reduce the carbon intensity of automobile fuels. We just passed in the legislature, and I was supportive of a bill to move to 100% clean electricity by 2040. I've been instrumental in trying to bring renewable fuels here, especially offshore wind. I think this helps everybody in this district, whether it's a worker, a small business owner, or, you know, or somebody in the agriculture and the grower industry. I think healthcare is another big piece of this puzzle. And whether, again, you're a small business owner or somebody who needs healthcare, it's really expensive. As chair of the House Healthcare Committee, I have been leading on these issues. I serve to make sure that all women across Oregon have access to the full spectrum of reproductive health care so that their financial future is determined by them. And whether or not, when and whether to start a family is determined by them. I was the lead advocate on this bill back in 2017. I think it's finding those common ground areas that really do move this district. I've been a leader in so many of these areas. Housing and homelessness, we just passed as in our state legislature. I was a champion of the bill to move $400 million into housing and homelessness across the state. These are things that people care about all over this district. And I know that because I've been working in this district since I was a district aide for Congresswoman Hooley, then as an advocate, and now as a state legislator. I'm really excited to continue all this work as a member of Congress.
Thank you. Carrie, you want to add your thoughts?
Yeah, thank you. I think where maybe I differ a little bit from the other candidates is I don't think I do understand. I don't think you can understand. I think the idea that you see a community say, I get what they want, I understand them, is maybe a lack of humility. And the correct answer is to ask and to say, tell me what you need, and to take them seriously. And I think that's the approach I would take. I've tried to do this, in my career. I did when I was doing international development work. So it's like 8 different countries. And I was trying to figure out what people needed, which is a very good way to learn humility. And over that process, you do see these patterns, which are people want their families to be okay. That's like so core. They want this economic stability, and they don't want disasters. And I mean, anything like catastrophic that happens to them. And I think sometimes the government loses track of these really fundamental.
Do we lose the audio?
100,000 Americans who suffocated to death. And while that was happening, I jumped on to work on, I wrote part of Biden's pandemic prevention bill, because we can't let that happen. That's a core fundamental element. So as best I can, I try and find the thing that's common to all humanity, which is your kids, your grandkids, and some stability within that. And that includes, stability in your old age. And past that, when there's other issues that come up, it's just humility and listening and really taking people seriously and meeting them where they are, which I think is core, which is key, and all you really can do.
Thank you. And Teresa, we'll hear from you to conclude this issue.
Thank you so much for the question. So I grew up in this district. I went to Jervis Elementary School and Woodburn Middle School and part of Woodburn High School, and then graduated from Western Oregon University and went on and got my master's from PSU. But, you know, it was my community who asked me to consider running for city council. And there was this community who asked me to run for state representative, where I became the first Indigenous Latina immigrant in the history of our state, because our community, our diverse community in this district asked me to do so. And now they've asked me to run for Congress. I'm probably the only candidate that has a multilingual website. I have Spanish, English, and Russian, because for me, it's really important to have an inclusive campaign and make sure that people see themselves in my campaign. That's really important to me. And it's the way I work. As a state legislator, I communicate in Spanish and English because these are the two top spoken languages in this district. And I make sure that I always hire bilingual staffers. Anybody who wants to call my office and are not a non-English speaker will know that they'll be able to speak to somebody. I really helped push for our state capitol to become a language access building. We were able to hire 4 full-time positions to ensure that our non-English speaking community, including sign language, could come and participate in democracy and be able to voice their concerns. These are the things that I will do as a congressional leader in Congress, because representation really does matter. Language access at the Capitol building would not have happened if we didn't have people like me who see that we need to make sure that we change systems. Of course, I pass policy. Thank you. Of course, I help pass a lot of progressive policies that impact our entire community. But this is a very important question that's been asked, and it's important to note that this congressional district needs to be represented by somebody who has the same lived experiences as the community that it represents. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's move on to the third question, and Kathleen Harder will lead the way. This involves healthcare. This nation has both political and social rights. Political protects freedom of expression and due process of law, while social provides publicly funded programs such as Social Security, K-12 education, and fire protection. With government spending trillions of dollars annually on health-related programs, is it time for Congress to designate health care as a social right and provide for it through a universal public program?
Thank you for that question, Ed. I've been a physician for 30 years. The last 2.5 have been serving on the front lines of COVID. And I have seen very clearly how poorly our healthcare system functions for patients and families and healthcare workers alike. We have the most expensive healthcare system in the world, yet we perform near the bottom on any kind of quality metrics, especially for those that are historically marginalized. And that has been very apparent during COVID. We have people who can't use the healthcare that they have, the health insurance they have, because of high deductibles and co-pays. I see patients return to the emergency department all the time because they either have to forego or ration their prescription medications because of the high costs. In this state, we have historic coverage for mental health services, and yet we can't get people who are suicidal into treatment for their mental crises because we just don't have enough providers. Our healthcare expenditures are nearly 20% of our GDP. And yet the people who are making healthcare policy decisions have never, ever seen a patient. They don't know what it's like to take care of people. The richest country on the planet must recognize healthcare as a right, not a privilege, and provide universal access to affordable, quality, physical, and behavioral health services. I am the only one who truly understands this problem. I deal with it every day. And I understand the complexities of healthcare. I've been boots on the ground for 30 years, and this has to be a priority to address this day one. I remember debating this back in undergrad decades ago. It's time that we actually do something about it. So the very first thing we need to do is to expand healthcare so that everyone gets the coverage they need when they need it.
Thank you. Andrea, hear from you.
Thank you. Yes, healthcare needs to be a social right across the board, and we need a social safety net for everyone. So we need to make sure that we are somehow providing healthcare, not coverage. People are tired of hearing that they have insurance coverage. That's not what patients and consumers need. They need access to real healthcare. And the only way to do that really is for the federal government to step in and to provide a Social Security or Medicare type of coverage for and real healthcare. And that means that access has to be affordable, and it does have to be quality care. We have to improve people's health along the way. It can't just be a system where we're not looking at comprehensive care. We're not looking at the full spectrum of reproductive health care. We're not looking at what I call the neck up issues, which is mental, behavioral health, addiction service, dental care, which we don't have under all coverage because benefits change, whether it's Medicare, your employer sponsored care, or Medicaid. Hearing, and that means for people who are seniors, you can get hearing surgery, but you can't get hearing aids that are actually covered at an affordable cost. It is all of this that needs to be taken into account. Make sure that we're meeting patients where they are right now, because right now it is not affordable. And clearly that includes the ability to negotiate drug prices. I have had this experience in the legislature. We haven't had the ability to move to a single payer system because our federal laws don't allow us to, but I have been moving to make sure we look at prescription drug costs. We have now some of the most transparent drug pricing in the nation. I've been moving to make sure that hospitals and health systems look at their costs and are making sure that financial assistance policies across the board are standardized. These are some of the steps that states can be taking, but it really will take the federal government to make sweeping change. And I was the lead on the debate on the floor to make sure that we could put into our constitution here in Oregon that healthcare is a human right. The late Representative Mitch Greenlick started this trailblazing, and I took it after he passed. So so I'm really proud of the work we've been doing here in Oregon. I'm proud of the work that I did as the chair of the House Healthcare Committee. I've been working at the state level as well as the federal level. Thank you. And I'm looking forward to working as a member of Congress.
Okay, thank you. Terry Flynn, we'll hear from you.
First, I'll say I think that Kathleen and answers were fantastic, and I agree with them. I think everyone in America should have access to quality, affordable healthcare. They're right. If you look at some of the metrics from other countries, the UK has better healthcare, costs a third as much. That's something like $10,000 cheaper per household. That's amazing. And what we're doing in the US is we're passing on the highest costs in medication to our seniors, of all people, like 4 times as high as it is in Europe. We're America. We're good at things. Don't tell me we can't move to universal healthcare. That's absurd. And maybe when we do it, we'll be the best at it. Really put our mind. And I also think we need to seriously consider how to reduce the administrative burden that the system now places on everyone, partially because it's really expensive, and partially because it's just terrible. I mean, if you take your kid to the doctor for strep throat, why should he be on the phone for 4 hours with the insurance company afterwards? Why does that have anything to do with it? I think this is something that's also very personal. It is very personal. So for years, my mother ended up spending more than half of her income just on health insurance. She didn't use it even when she had it because she was very scared of going to the doctor. She'd gotten hit with a couple surprise bills back in the 90s. And for her, she thought of going to seek medical care as like financial roulette, that sometimes it just blew up in your face. She had a heart condition. She knew she had a heart condition. She knew it was serious. She went decades without treating it, and she died of it. She'd be 70 if she was still alive. This is very personal. This is not okay with how we've been functioning. And I absolutely, if I'm in Congress, will push as hard as I can to fix this system.
Hey, thank you. We're from Loretta Smith.
Thank you. I do believe that healthcare should be not only a social right, but it is a human right. And Dr. Harder, I don't think that you have the market on understanding healthcare just because you're a doctor. Patients come to you. You're not in a mobile unit going out to patients and meeting them where they're at. As someone who has had multiple healthcare scares, our system only deals with sick care. It does not deal with healthcare. I authored and passed a Medicare for All resolution at the county. And just like you said, Representative Salinas, you can pass them, but we can't put them into play because of the federal government. So I understand directly who we talk to. We're responsible for the health clinics. I saw people down on the ground who needed insulin, who needed pills for diabetes. I myself found out in COVID, I have diabetes. I had a brain tumor. I almost lost my life my first year in the county. I had to have a 6.5 hour surgery where I had 2 surgeons, 2 anesthesiologists. I want everybody in the United States to be able to have that kind of care that I had when I was at the county, to make sure that you're brought back to life. So for me, as a woman of color, I get it. This COVID crisis has showed us we got exposed. People of color have underlying issues. And so as a result, when a pandemic comes through, we are hit the hardest. We're the ones who are dying the quickest. Our seniors in our community, they're the ones who've passed away. So we need to be very clear about the words that we choose and make sure we understand that who are the priority communities? Where do they live? Dr. Dover, yes, we do need to have comprehensive healthcare reform, and we need to have a Medicare for all type of health system universally in the United States, period.
Thank you. Okay, let's hear from this issue of healthcare.
I'm sorry, was that directed to me, Dr. Dover?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes,
I'm sorry,
yes.
you broke up and I didn't hear.
All right. Receptionist
Yeah.
here.
Thank you. Yes, healthcare is an important topic for me. Back in 2016, when I was first running for office, I visited many families, and they shared their tragic and sad stories around, the fact that even if you had insurance, you still couldn't afford to be sick. This is unacceptable. I remember a woman named Rita who, lived very humbly in her apartment and shared with me her bottle of medication. And she said she would have to cut it in half so it could last as long as possible. That's unacceptable. I spoke to a group of parents who were caring for their disabled children, who shared with me, and actually the topic of the reason why I went to speak to them was for them to tell me about some of the challenges as being caregivers, but actually they decided they didn't want to talk about themselves. They wanted to talk about the challenges they were having with accessing life-saving medication at the pharmacy. They couldn't understand why if the doctor prescribed medication for their children, when they went to the pharmacy, it was not there. And so they inspired me and motivated me to advocate for myself so I can be on the healthcare committee. Absolutely, we need to have, a universal healthcare system that supports everybody, period. I believe that we also need to look at our healthcare system from an equity lens, because providing healthcare is not the same for everybody. We have many families who have had bad experiences in our healthcare system and won't go to a clinic or to a doctor's office because of their negative experience. And sometimes it's really working with partners, community-based organizations, working with our healthcare system to ensure that these families are getting the treatment that they need.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, let's hear from Cody Reynolds.
So I have a unique perspective on healthcare, and I'd like to point out that I've been advocating publicly for universal healthcare since my first run in 2012. But my entire adult life, I have received government-run healthcare, first through the Army and now through the Veterans Administration. And I'm very happy with the care that I have because it gives me the ability to take risks. I know with certainty that if I get sick, that I can go to the doctor. I know with certainty that I can go to the doctor or the emergency room if I injure myself. And I don't think Americans should have to serve on the front line to have that certainty, to have that confidence, to that they can get the care they need when they need it. Sorry, it's very personal for me. My father, he died last year, and he had stage 4 lung cancer, and he was one of those men who got up every day and went to work. And he just did it till he was a month before he died. And he went to the hospital and they said, you have pneumonia. And he came back and they went back 2 weeks later and, oh, you have stage 4 lung cancer. And then 2 weeks later, he died. But he was one of those people that was afraid to use the system. People shouldn't be afraid to go get the care they need. They just shouldn't.
Thank you. Okay, let's move on to the last candidate on this question. That would be Matt West. Matt?
This is a very personal question for me. When I was much younger growing up, my best friend, his dad, Chris, got sick. He fell sick from a disease that was imminently treatable, but he was the only employee in the household. He had a stay-at-home wife and 2 kids. And this was before the Affordable Care Act. So he knew that if he went to go seek treatment for this disease, he would probably end up being labeled as a pre-existing condition, and his family would have been kicked off of healthcare and all of the issues that would arise from that. So my friend's dad made the very personal choice to not seek care, and he essentially chose to die. And I've seen the effects of that on my friend's family. They've reverberated through the decades, really. And I know that that story is not unique. That story is shared by so many people across our country. Nobody in this entire nation should have to choose between getting care or dying. Which one's optimal? That's why we absolutely need to go towards a single-payer healthcare system, Medicare for all. That is the only path that can actually ensure that medical treatment is actually treated as an inalienable right. That's the only path forward. Even when you have insurance, even if it's good insurance, sometimes you are sitting there in a life-threatening situation, choosing not to go into the emergency room because you're not sure if you want to pay for the deductible on that. That's the sort of system that we have right now. And the only way to get past it is to have free healthcare at the point of service. Insurance is fundamentally a racket in this instance, and we need to have single payer healthcare in order to ensure that healthcare is treated as an inalienable human right in our nation.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to move on to the 4th question, and Carrie Flynn will be our first respond on this. We're going to deal with public safety and guns. The Second Amendment protects the right to keep and bear arms. It does not say use, manufacture, import, buy, or sell. Conservative Judge Antonin Scalia said that use of arms can be regulated by public safety laws. What public safety laws that do not violate the Second Amendment should be enacted that would reduce the level of gun violence? Gary?
Yeah, I actually don't, okay, my approach would be slightly different, which is I think that a lot of the problem with trying to get gun regulation now is that it's so overheated as a political area. So there's like so much anger on both sides. And as soon as, Congress turns over, as it might this year, it just is reversed and again and again. And I feel as though each time you do it, sides entrench deeper. My inclination as a policy matter would be to try to get everyone to stop yelling, get people to start talking. I think that we talk, we'll decide we have a lot in common, and that there are common sense solutions here, and that can be acted on. But I think at this point, we've proved unilateral solutions are not helping. Past that, I would vote for almost anything that we could get. Probably anything that we could get bipartisan support behind, because it would stick. And we could sort of end this process and all the waste that comes with it and all the radicalization that comes from it. I grew up in gun country. This is a very serious issue there. It's a very angry issue there. And I don't think that helps anyone.
Okay, thank you. We'll hear from Cody.
I've got a lot of experience with guns, a lot of experience with guns, and I'm a proud gun owner. And I think that no responsible gun owner should have anything to fear from its government. That being said, we definitely need to be doing more to keep guns and what could be considered tools of war out of the hands of dangerous people, whether they be terrorists or extremists. And I think we're failing there, because of that anger, because of that distrust, because we look at any incursion upon a fundamental constitutional right as a slippery slope, a guaranteed path towards the inevitable taking away or reducing or diminishing of that right. There needs to be common ground. I think we can all agree that we do not need nuclear weapons in the hands of individuals, but if we were to take things to the extreme, that would be the argument that you could make. It's ridiculous on its face, but it is the argument that can be made. I think we really need to focus on background checks. We need to be focusing on those areas of the law that make sense. If you are making terroristic threats, maybe you should have your gun privileges reduced. If you are a violent criminal, maybe you should not have guns. But that all starts with finding common ground, with having honest discussions with stakeholders that are capable of turning the temperature down on the discourse.
Thank you. Let's hear from Teresa next on this issue.
Thank you. So this issue, I think, is really important in making sure that we are protecting, we need to have policies that protect our children. There have been too many deaths with children accidentally shooting themselves because they accessed somebody's gun in the family because it wasn't put away. That to me is really important, our children's protection. I also believe that we should absolutely have policies that do background checks. We have, and people should have, before they're able to purchase a gun, they should absolutely have training to ensure they know how it's used and be able to, I don't want to take away the rights for people to have guns in general, because there's hunters and, that's a sport. That's something that people like to do. But I definitely support the idea of making sure we keep them out of kids' ranges, and that there's background checks, and that we protect people from, criminals who want to access guns, which I don't believe is an okay thing to do. We definitely need to have these types of policies that protect most vulnerable people. Thank you.
Thank you. Matt West, you take the question.
Thank you. First up, guns kill people. Guns are one of the main reasons why children are terrified of going to school right now. Guns are one of the main reasons that suicides are successful and high in this nation. When I went to undergrad, I went to the University of Arizona, and Gabby Giffords was my congressperson. When I left Tucson, that was 1 year, that was 6 months before the attack, the attempted assassination on her. And that grocery store was my friend's grocery store across the street. We used to go there to get, food for like a grill out sort of thing. So I know exactly where that was. I felt that viscerally, and it is horrifying to me that we're still at a point where we're discussing whether or not Gabby Gifford's PAC and her very sensible gun control arguments are being dismissed out of hand and they're not being taken seriously. The Second Amendment states fundamentally that a well-regulated militia, well-regulated militia being necessary for a free state, the rights to bear arms shall be infringed. That part specifically is all about well-regulation, and there's no part of the Constitution that does not say that licensure should not be required. Right now, we have far too many guns in far too many people's hands, and we absolutely need to work towards a system where we can pass common sense gun registration, close the gun show loophole, and make sure that we have a system where people are actually registered for the weapons that they have.
Thank you. Kathleen, your turn. Answer the question.
Thank you, Ed. Both my husband and I are responsible gun owners, and I think that's the key. People who own guns need to be responsible. They should have them locked up, as is required now in the state. I think that was a great way to handle that particular problem. But there are some things that allow guns to get in the hands of people where they shouldn't be. So we need to close the gun show loophole. There should be universal background checks, no matter where you purchase the gun. Absolutely. We should limit the size of the magazines. There's no reason that you should have clips with more than 10 bullets in it. That's absurd. You don't need that for sport or anything. No one needs automatic rifles. That's going to limit that kind of mass shooting. Imagine if you can limit the type of weapon and the amount of bullets that a threat would be reduced, and give people time to get to safety, and get law enforcement some time to get to mitigate the situation. We need to strengthen laws against things like ghost guns, which we have seen just here in Salem. There was a person who was arrested and is now in custody because of finding 60 of these ghost guns in their property that they actually manufactured on site. We have to find ways to reduce that risk. The Second Amendment is clear, and Carrick's right. There's a lot of divisiveness about this, but I think we have to understand that guns are part of our culture. We have hunters. We have people that are very passionate about that right, and we need to respect that. But it needs to be responsible gun ownership, and there are some very clear common sense reforms that we can initiate to make it much safer to have a gun in this country, so that we don't run into these mass shootings anymore.
Thank you. And we'd like now to hear from Loretta Smith.
Thank you. I think we definitely need to follow the Second Amendment, and I do believe in that. But having had a cousin who just got killed because someone wasn't educated on how to use a gun when they were at a club a couple months ago, and he was in his 20s, and just like what happened in Sacramento, he's gone. We have to close the loophole for these trade shows that sell guns. We have to figure out, how do we stop this gun violence in our schools? How do we educate the folks who do have them, and make sure that those parents are locking those guns up? But for the life of me, I'm not understanding why we don't have universal background checks. What is the big deal about having a check and having it just a little bit more time? And we have these ghost buyers. They buy for young people, and these owners of these gun stores, they need to be cracked down on, because they wouldn't be able to get the guns if they wouldn't sell them to them, right? So I'm experiencing a lot of gun violence in Portland right now, and I think that is a direct result of having an opportunity gap. And young people don't have what I would say a future. Some of these young people, particularly underserved folks, they feel like they don't have anything to look forward to. So they're out here acting like the Wild Wild West. And it's scary. So we need to have people who get it, who understand it, and who can put programs in place, like I did with our summer jobs program, it gave people an opportunity to have their first opportunity. And we were able to serve over 7,000 young people. And now that program has been cut in half. We have to give folks some kind of inspiration to go forward.
Thank you. Mrs. Forrest, the last answer on this issue.
Thank you. So going back to your beginning statement, Supreme Court Justice Scalia basically framed it as what the federal government can do is around public safety. And the Oregon Pediatric Society essentially said that gun safety is a public safety issue for children, which is why they brought a bill to the legislature a couple of years ago. I think it was 21, maybe 20, where we passed a bill around the locations at which you could carry firearms. And so we now ban it here in Oregon. I was a champion. I spoke to it on the floor of the House, where schools and government buildings are no longer areas where you can conceal and carry your firearms. We do need to close the background checks. We need to close the Charleston loophole. I have been named a Moms Demand Action gun safety champion as in my roles as a state legislator and in my races every time I ran. I would think that I would have that same designation this time around for running in this district, but I know what it's like because I have been working on this issue. Kids came to me very early on. Over 300 kids came down to the Capitol from this district, from the 6th district, and basically spoke on this issue that they were afraid, and it's causing mental health issues for kids. It's causing behavioral health issues. And we do need to do something about this more comprehensively. I was working for a member of Congress when Columbine happened, and we really thought the assault rifle ban was going to be implemented way back in the late 90s. And we're still talking about that. But a big thing that we also have to look up is a little bit further upstream, and what do our trade policies allow? Opening up China and the WTO to firearms was something that we knew we were doing when we let China into the World Trade Organization, and our trade policies are a part of this as well. But then going back to domestically, ghost guns and those parts that cannot be traced is a huge problem right now. And it's in its nascent stages. It's going to explode here very soon. And because we can't trace any of these individual parts, and that's why it's called a ghost gun, is because all these parts come together and then you develop one gun and someone can put it together and it's not traceable. We have to get our arms around this.
Thank you. We'll have one more question and then we'll take a short intermission. And so our next question deals with congressional priorities. And we'd like to start with Loretta Smith as the chance to address this first. As a candidate, each of you must address many issues of concern to particular groups of voters. Once in office, you will not have many opportunities for dealing with each of them. The congressional committee system dominates legislation, and you will be on only 2. With this in mind, what committees would you like to serve on, and what ideas would you prioritize?
I'd like to serve on the Ways and Means. I'd like to serve on financial services, if I could, energy and water. Because my priorities have always been is to make sure that we help families who can get ahead. My former boss was the head of the Small Business Committee. And what we know about Oregonians, that we're a state of small business. And so in order to really be able to build an infrastructure, that would be a committee that I would want to be on, helping to create good paying jobs, guaranteeing quality healthcare, protecting our environment, of course, is an issue, and making sure that we expand affordable housing. Those are things that I think are bread and butter issues. Right now, people are experiencing high gas and grocery prices. They're seeing, increases in diapers and detergent, just basic normal things that we have. And I want to make sure that corporate America, that they pay their fair share, because right now they're not paying their fair share. They're actually paying nothing. And so with a voice, and using my voice in Congress, I want to make sure that all families have an opportunity to get ahead. And those are the two committees that I would like to be on that I think could help me do that.
Thank you. Matt West.
My number one priority is and continues to be climate change. I have spent my life working to fight it. I have my PhD in renewable energy, solid oxide fuel cells in particular, specifically to combat climate change. As such, I would want to be on the Science, Space, and Technology Committee, along with the Financial Services Committee. The Energy Committee would also be a great fit for me, given my background. Climate change is by and far the biggest issue, not just to me, but going around this district when I'm talking to people. They may change the words, they may talk about it in terms of water rights or wildfires, but the language is different. The actual core concept is the same. And I would make sure that we work towards treating climate change like the existential crisis that it actually is. Last year, this district, our home, was hit particularly hard by climate change. We were dealing with the ice storm a year ago, when maybe 1 month or so, where we had people lose power for about a week in some certain towns. 6 months later, we had a heat dome where we're now dealing with an all-time high temperature, 1 degree less than Las Vegas's all-time high temperature. I do have an air conditioner. I'm one of the few people in this district who's lucky enough to have one. It's a small portable unit. My apartment was 94 degrees with it. So this is something that everyone's feeling. I had to wear a gas mask to walk my dog during the wildfires last year. We need somebody to treat this like the existential crisis that it is. I spent my life combating this. I have my PhD studying this, and I will work towards fighting it when I'm in Congress as well.
Dr. Dover, you got muted. Can you unmute yourself, sir? Just need to unmute on your, down on your bottom bar there.
Okay, I think, can you hear me now?
You got it. Away we go.
Okay, did you hear the question? Kathleen, it's your turn. You hear me?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, so I as a physician for 30 years, obviously healthcare is my my passion, and it's where I think we need to spend an extraordinary amount of effort, and we need to have people there who understand the problems in healthcare and can speak to pragmatic solutions on how to make it better. Because of that, I think Energy and Commerce, the Subcommittee on Health, would be an appropriate place to be. With respect to Loretta's comment earlier, I am very well qualified to talk about healthcare. I work in what's arguably one of the busiest hospitals on the West Coast, and I take care of the sickest of the sick there as they come in from everything from trauma to gasping for breath from the wildfires to dying from COVID. So I see the problems there, and because of my unique perspective, I understand what it's like to be a healthcare provider and what we need to do to change things to make it better for patients as well as healthcare workers. The other thing I think is very important, as we've heard from others, is the existential threat of climate change and the fact that we are doing not nearly enough to try to mitigate that solution. There's the Environment Subcommittee on Energy and Commerce that would be a great place to work on that work. You know, we just got the international report about how we're doing as far as trying to mitigate climate change, and it's not good. We are seeing a sliver of hope in that because of market pressures, green energy costs have come down. So we're getting a transition that the market is leading on. We need the federal government to lead on this. And that's the sort of thing we need someone in Congress who can champion these very important problems. If we don't address climate change, everything else is a moot point.
Thank you. Let's have an answer from Andrea Salinas.
Thank you. So for folks who don't know, I work for 3 different members of Congress, Senator Harry Reid, Congressman Pete Stark, and Congresswoman Darlene Hooley. So I have a really good idea of which committees I would love to serve on. And this is a very pie in the sky kind of question. I served as the Tax, Trade, and Social Security Policy Advisor when Congressman Stark worked on Ways and Means. So I would love to work on the Ways and Means Committee and serve on the subcommittee on healthcare as well as trade. However, I know that that is unlikely given we have members on that committee. We have members on energy and commerce, and we have a member on labor and education. So there's nobody right now who serves on the Appropriations Committee. And this is a big agricultural district. I would love to serve on the Ag and Rural Development FDA subcommittee under the Appropriations Committee. I would love to bring home some earmarks and some real projects for this district. And I think this district deserves it. I would also love to be able to serve on the Natural Resources Committee. We have a tribal community that's really important to this district, Grand Ron, and I would love to be able to be the voice for that. So working on, I think, the things that I'm really excited to work on, including healthcare. Healthcare has a place under the Appropriations Committee for the Health and Human Services. So those are some of the things more realistically that I think I'd be able to work on. And I know how to work amendments from day one. I'd be able to work the other committees, even though I didn't serve on them. So I'm really excited no matter what committee I serve on.
Thank you. Cody Reynolds.
So first, I'd like to say that anybody who thinks they're going to Congress as a freshman congressperson and is going to do anything of note, they're fooling themselves. Like, freshman congressmen have no power, and I recognize that. Where we can be effective in going to Congress is through our ability to build coalitions, and I put myself above any of my opponents in my ability to do that. That being said, I would like to serve on the Armed Services Committee. I'm a veteran. These issues are near and dear to my heart. I think it's extremely important that we send a veteran to Congress from Oregon, because with Representative DeFazio retiring, for the first time, the federal delegation will be without a veteran representative in Congress. And I don't think we want the Republican alternative. That's all I have to say, but thank you.
Thank you. We would like to hear from Teresa on this issue.
Thank you so much, Dr. Dover. Education changed my life. I'm the first person in my family to go to college and the first person in my family to get a master's degree. Super grateful for the opportunities. And because of the amazing teachers that inspired me and motivated me, encouraged me to go to college and to let me know that I was college material. I really worked hard towards aiming at becoming a teacher, but realized, that I didn't have that special something that teachers have, and decided that maybe it's policy that was going to work out for me. And sure enough, it did. As the chair of the Education Committee, it's really important to me that we look at policies that help transform our education system. One of the policies that I passed in 2021 was my Student Voice Task Force bill, House Bill 2590. We're implementing it now, where we are going around to different universities and community colleges to talk to students. And those are the people most impacted by policies that we as legislators make. And I felt it was time that we really reached out to the students to tell us what we needed to change, what we needed to do different in respect to improving our post-secondary higher ed. And so we're learning a lot. And so for me, going to Congress, I would absolutely love to be on the Education and Labor Committee. And, understanding that this district is, very much agricultural. I mentioned my parents were migrant farmers. Time is up? Okay, thank you.
Okay, let's conclude this question and let's hear from Derek Clem.
Thank you. My understanding is a little bit similar to Cody in that on your first term, it's quite difficult to do lots of things. And it's also quite difficult to get on certain committees that are sort of more for senior members. If I could get on one for more senior members, I'd love to be on appropriations. It controls the budget. It has it sort of has an opportunity to do a lot of good over a lot of different areas. And I think it's a place where you could make lots of changes. In the meantime, I would be interested also in energy and commerce, also the health subcommittee. I would be taking a different angle, obviously, from Kathleen, who has a healthcare expertise. I would look to use that as a platform for the pandemic prevention project and trying to move that forward, and biosecurity more generally. I had some success in the past, actually, just while I was working at Georgetown and having staffers come by with bills and say, like, what do you think? Because my expertise in semiconductors, and being able to mark them up and move them forward. So I think it's possible I could still get some things done, even if, like, as a freshman, it's somewhat limited. I think if you're willing to not have credit, there's a lot of things you can do. I would also be interested in science, space, and technology. Again, I'd partially be for the biotechnology thing and trying to prevent pandemics and push Biden's pandemic prevention plan forward. I think this is my first priority, maybe not my top priority. And also for my top priority, which is creating jobs in Oregon. And if you're on science, space, and technology, you can help maneuver things around to bulk up the semiconductor industry in our area and sort of replant our silicon forest, which again was something I did to some extent just in an advisory capacity before. But I think there's a lot to be said for this. And this is also where you build the technology of the future.
90 seconds is done.
Is it done or you said?
90 seconds is over.
Oh, sorry.
Okay. At this point, we've covered 5 questions, had a lot of very interesting from our array of candidates, and certainly very inspirational thoughts from them. It's time for a short break, so we'll take about 5 minutes and then we'll resume for the next round of questioning.
Thank you.
Okay, we'd like to move on to the next question. And in this question, Andrea will be the person that answers it first. And this will deal with education. Every state has a publicly funded universal educational system that concludes with a high school diploma. Our society once decided that a high school education was necessary for functioning in the modern world. This seems outdated as people acquire higher education today while incurring massive debts. Is it now time for governments to provide publicly funded bachelor's degree education as the goal? Andrea.
Thank you for this question. I think the necessary look at education needs to start with pre-K. When we first got to Oregon and my daughter was starting in elementary school, kindergarten was half day and it was 2 hours. And to me, that was not half a day. We've since expanded, but we are now looking at pre-K to college and what that whole career path looks like. So if we call it cradle to career, and what does that look like? And what is necessary to not only develop a workforce, but also to make sure that we are meeting young people where they are. So to make sure that we are providing for career and technical education, as well as music and the arts and STEM before those kids get to college or before they go on to their technical education or additional post-secondary careers. So I think we do need to provide that, and it should be publicly funded. I think we have to obviously figure out how to fund that. Those tax policies are going to come in really handy. I think we need to start looking at corporations who are earning too much and aren't giving back to the workforce that they actually will need to develop and hire later on. So I think we need to look at the whole structure, but starting with pre-K and moving into higher ed and making sure that our kids post-secondary do have a higher education that is either publicly funded or much more affordable, because it is just strapping and really hurting kids and young adults after they leave college.
Thank you. Let's hear from Teresa.
Thank you. Oh, I got out of the camera. There I am. So this is education's a really important aspect to the work I've been doing. I helped make sure that we passed laws that brought in an additional $2 billion for our K-12 students. I definitely believe in the importance of making sure that our youngest, our babies and our pre-K also have an opportunity for success. I helped pass a law that created its own agency. But we've invested a lot of money in those areas, and I'm really proud of that. The area that we have not, invested a lot of money is in post-secondary higher ed. And, I feel like at some point, because we don't have a streamlined system, we're going to bottleneck the system between our students earning a high school diploma or a GED, because we do have that as an option for students. Because I earned a GED and went on to college and now have a master's degree. And so I want to make sure that, when we do talk about post-secondary higher ed, that we are inclusive, that it includes CTE, it includes apprenticeship, as well as, 2 and 4 year degrees. The task force I mentioned earlier today really is about having our students' voices tell us what is it that we need to do different in post-secondary higher ed, because we know it is incredibly unaffordable. People can't afford to go to college. That's not okay. We have a lot of brilliant, talented young people who absolutely should be in college, but can't because they can't afford it. We have an extreme student loan issue in this country. And, when I get to Congress, I want to make sure that we create policies that either remove the entire student loan for folks, or, remove a portion of it, a significant portion of it, because right now our folks who have, including me, I owe a lot of debt. I had to get a lot of loans to pay for my education. And some people cannot purchase a home because they have so much debt. And that's just unacceptable.
Time is up.
Thank you.
Thank you. Let's hear from Cody.
So I went to West Point, and realistically, it's probably the only way I could have gone to college. My family didn't have the money to pay for me to go to school. And I don't know that I would have graduated from any other place anyways. It gave me the tools, the discipline, the structure that I needed to succeed. And I've done a lot with it in my life, but the reality is that not everybody wants to go to college. Not everybody needs to go to college, but everybody needs a path towards a better life for themselves and their family. And I think that starts with trades. Like we've removed trades from our school systems, and that is a crime. We are doing a disservice to those individuals, those children in our communities that maybe know that college isn't the path forward for them. We need to bring those back to our schools. I'd also like to touch on the early childhood education component. I've owned a business, and in the past, we provided childcare to our employees because it was the right thing to do. For them and for us, we were stronger for it, and their family was better because of it. So there's an aspect to education. It's that, like Representative Salinas mentioned, is that it doesn't just end with college. It starts with early childhood education and access to it, and we need to be doing more to ensure that everybody, every family, has that access.
Thank you. And now I think it's time for Carrick Flynn.
Thank you very much. I actually wasn't college bound myself until my senior year. Kind of randomly, I got a Ford Family Foundation scholarship, and it was tuition and living expenses. So I'm like, well, it's better than real jobs. I'll try it. And it worked out really well for me. And I think it should be the case that everyone who wants to go to college or who would do well in college should be able to afford to do so. But I also think it should be easier for people to not go to college and still have good, financially secure middle-class lives. So for example, my older brother is brilliant, he's talented. His bosses believe he should be qualified for the next promotion up the ladder at his job. He can't get it, unfortunately, it requires a college degree. Now my brother struggled in high school, almost failed out, tried to do PCC, he did fail out. He's not good at education, he's a brilliant worker, but now they need someone with like a Russian literature degree so that they can move cement around a terminal. It's this strange class market, it's an unnecessary ceiling. So while I was working with Congress on the semiconductor things, one of the things I liked about the jobs that should be coming to Oregon is a lot of these are good paying jobs that don't require a college degree. My little brother this time got one of those jobs, and he went from working out, out in the weather for very little money to, he's inside, he's paid well, he has savings, he has more money than I do now. And he's respected in his job. And I think that's what work should be. Now, if I make it to Congress, I'd like to at least double the Pell Grant so that poor students can get a chance to go in. People from backgrounds like mine. I would also like to provide federal funds for more trade schools, apprenticeships, and certain forms of on-the-job training, as others have said. I'd also like to stop or reduce the degree ceiling. I think the easiest way to do this would be to require the federal government to justify any time its jobs required a degree, why exactly it required a degree, and to try and remove the stigma that way and actually open up jobs. And I think that this is an area where reform can be made that benefits the economy and benefits Americans. Shoving people through a system that costs them a lot of money, I still have student debt, and doesn't necessarily need to be used for the job, especially when some people struggle, is unfair and unnecessary.
Thank you. This time we'd like to hear from Matt West.
Thank you very much. First and foremost, we absolutely need to ensure that we have broad-based student loan debt cancellation. Many people my age are stuck with massive student loans that they'll never be able to pay off, and they are hoping that by working through those public service jobs, public sector, they'll be able to have that debt forgiven, which will also be a taxable event for them. So even with that, they're still kind of stuck with the bill. We should have in our country free education from pre-K all the way to college. I personally am a product of the public school system. I went to public schools my entire life, all the way to my PhD, and I really know the value that a good education can bring. And we need to ensure that we invest in our public institutions, be they elementary, high school, colleges, community colleges. Should we work on expanding the community college sector significantly? We will see an ability for people to actually pursue their dreams in a way that is able for them to do so. We need to double funding to Title I and Title II. What is investing in education, if not investing in our future? What is it, if not helping to build a better society, as our kids will eventually end up being the next generation's doctors, engineers, lawyers, what have you, cross-section of everyone who's currently on this panel. We absolutely need to reevaluate how we fund schools at the state and local level, because no one's education should be determined primarily by their zip code. And as we expand community colleges, we also need to make sure that we include vocational training and union apprenticeships as part of that pathway.
Thank you. Let's hear from Kathleen.
Thank you, Ed. Public schools are near and dear to my heart. I tell people all the time I would never have had any success in my life if it weren't for the public school teachers who interacted with me. And I appreciate them to this day. We really need to have a system that we look at very holistically so that kids can succeed. That's the bottom line. So it needs to be starting with universal pre-K. Every young child needs to have that ability to get involved in school at an early age. One of the cool things, and those of you who maybe are not familiar with this district as much as I am, we have a tremendous public-private partnership through things like our Career and Technical Education Center, CTEC, as well as the Willamette Career Academy. These are two great models that allow kids who, some of them may never have graduated high school if it weren't for this opportunity. They were able to work on apprenticeships, everything from diesel mechanics to healthcare, and not just graduate on time, but also graduate with a certificate that they can get a good good job that pays good wages as soon as they finish that. We also need to be sure that kids can get their community college paid for. But probably the other thing that we really need to focus on is our workforce shortages. There's expected by 2026, we're going to be 200,000 nurses short in this country. So in places where we have high workforce demands, those are the professions that we need to incentivize, and that's what we should target for loan forgiveness.
Thank you. And Loretta, would you include this issue for us?
Yes, I totally agree that we need to have public school education paid for. One of the perks of being a congressperson or an aide to a congressperson, you can get your student loans paid for while you're working. And I worked for a senator for 7 years in the House and then 14 years in the US Senate. And so maybe about my 15th year, they started this new program. And so you can now get your tuition paid for. So if members of Congress and their staff can get their tuition paid for, we most certainly should make sure that public school universities, that we can pay for tuition for the American people. I know that the military academy is one of the best ways in which to get an education. For 15 years, I was the coordinator for that program, and it allowed folks from rural areas and from urban areas to get a great education. So there are ways that we can expand it, and there are ways that we already know that we can expand it, and I think it needs to happen now.
Thank you. I think that now covers that particular question. So we're going to move on to the next question. And we tried to rotate this so that everybody gets to be the first to answer a question. So it's Matt's turn. Matt, I have a question that I think you're going to have trouble answering. Certain industry. What's that? I was joking.
Happily give it a shot.
Yes. Certain industries spend billions of dollars denying the existence of global warming resulting from human behavior. Some conservative news reporters even ridicule climate change when massive snowfalls cause wintertime havoc. Some members of Congress have proposed a Green New Deal, government efforts to create jobs in non-polluting industries. Do you favor or oppose such an approach?
We absolutely need to have people in Congress who understand climate change if we're going to beat it. We need to have people who understand the technologies that are key towards unlocking that future. I support the Green New Deal. I view it as an excellent starting point. We also need to make sure that we take all the environmental provisions from Build Back Better that were yet to pass, pull them out, and ensure that we pass those as well. We have to get past the people who are holding back progress. As you mentioned, the very wealthy industries and the people who happen to be very wealthy who run them have benefited from this inaction. They have stopped us progressing forward. They know that climate change is real. They know that. They've known it for decades. The fact that they've lied about it to the American people for a long time is simply because it is in their best interest financially to do so. Our district has felt the cost of that inaction acutely, as I mentioned previously. As I also said, I've worked my entire life towards helping to unlock these technologies that will move us to this new economy, a carbon neutral or even carbon negative economy as we move forward. Wind, solar, these technologies that we choose to unlock, the specifics that we use matter. We need people who understand science in Congress that will be shaping our nation's response to the greatest challenge of our lifetime. And that's why I'm running for Congress.
Thank you. Kathleen?
Thank you, Ed. As we all, I think everyone here agrees that climate is the existential crisis of our lifetime. We've seen the effects of a changing environment here in the district within the last couple of years with the wildfires and the heat dome and the ice storms. I saw people coming in the hospital because of inhaling particulates. They could barely breathe from the wildfires. We saw people that died because they couldn't access cooling centers and air conditionings. And we saw crop losses that were devastating, especially to small farmers and small wineries. So it's, as we said, the existential crisis of our lifetime. How do we address it? As I said before, there are some interesting things that are happening within the market. That is because the cost of green energy has come down so tremendously because of technology advances. The market's actually driving this more than governments are, which is unbelievable. But we have to push harder and faster. But when you look at something like the Green New Deal, I think it causes some problems that we can work around if we were a little bit more strategic. And one of the things that we need to work on, for example, is how we adapt our forests to be safer, to avoid the next threat of a wildfire. And we have really unique things that are happening within the state of Oregon that I think can be a model for the entire nation. And we have research forests where we're actually going to get science and data and be able to use this to help mitigate what's happening with the climate and prevent wildfires of the future. I personally am very much in favor of carbon fee and dividend model.
Time is up.
Where those dividends go back to the individual so they can reduce their personal carbon footprint. I think that's the way to go.
Thank you. And we'd like to hear from Loretta Smith.
Thank you. It is no question that climate change is real and we need to protect our environment and we need to preserve Oregon's vibrant natural resources and its ecosystem and utilize our abundant renewable wind and solar resources to combat the climate crisis and reduce our dependence on fossil fuels. When I was a county commissioner, I voted to support that, to have us less dependent on fossil fuels by the year 2040. We need to figure out how to take away we need to bring back some civility in the Congress so that we can have conversations not only about the environment, but about education and about voting rights. We know that folks who are low income and communities of color in terms of climate change, that they are in worse off positions than others because they don't have a lot of trees in their communities. It's hotter where they're at. We look at the folks who were down in Medford, they had this bootleg fire. This bootleg fire was so hot that it had a fire tornado in it that you couldn't even fight it. So this is not going to stop. It's only going to increase. And if anybody had any question about climate change, all they have to do is look at Oregon and look at the wildfires that happened over the last 3 years. They are real and they have a definite impact on workers and their respiratory systems. So we need to keep that in mind. How do we help the people that it is adversely affecting and make sure that we have enough resources to help them?
Thank you. And let's move on to Teresa.
Thank you so much for the question, Dr. Dover. You know, I completely support the Green New Deal and acknowledge that we have a severe climate environment issue here. As you know, daughter farm workers, I really worry about the people who are most impacted by climate change. And those are our outdoor workers, including our farm workers. We lost Sebastian Francisco Perez, who worked in St. Paul, you know, a couple summers ago. And, you know, this is a personal issue for me because my parents also work in St. Paul at a nursery. And so I was always checking on them to make sure that, you know, that they either weren't working in the extreme heat or they weren't working in the extreme cold, because we also had a severe storm where many of us lost power for many, many weeks. And so for me, it's just really important that, you know, we really address this and that we become energy independent and reduce carbon emissions by creating jobs that are environmentally and energy friendly. And, you know, we need to invest more in building electric cars. And again, just, you know, important to acknowledge that we just need to be energy independent from oil and gas. And just, you know, I just want to acknowledge all the people, vulnerable populations who are most impacted by climate change. Thank you.
Okay, let's hear from Carrick.
Thank you. Actually, I'd first like to thank Kathleen for bringing up the carbon fee and dividend. It's kind of brave. It's not a very popular position, but I think it's really important. It's one I completely agree with. So thank you for that. As we've seen, obviously climate change is real. And the last 2 years, we've had wildfires, made our air actually dangerous to us. We've had heat waves have been extremely dangerous, especially to the elderly. It's been evident longer back than that. So in 1996, when I was 9, there was a 1 in 500 year flood that left my family homeless. And then in 2007, there was a 1 in 500 year flood that left my mother homeless in the same river. Like, that's not what 1 in 500 means, but these extreme events are going to be what it means as we go forward and as the climate shifts around. We must stay like the climate seriously. It is a potentially manageable problem, manageable with obviously some damage already done. I think it's important that we don't be defeatist or complacent when it comes to facing these sorts of challenges. I think that this is something where it's worth really buckling down and supporting the expansion of a robust, clean economy. This also creates high quality, high paying manufacturing jobs for Oregonians potentially. So I'll advocate for investment in clean technologies, including especially solar panels. There's geothermal systems that seem increasingly promising, batteries. And honestly, many of the best companies and the most prominent startups in these areas are based out of this district up in the Silicon Forest. I would also like to see more government investment in carbon sequestration to see if we can actually slow or reverse the damage, as Matt was saying earlier. I think that is important. But I think this is something, if we take seriously, actually seriously, we can do. The question is if we can't take it seriously.
Thank you. And Andrea, will you take it from here?
Yes, thank you. Yes, I support the Green New Deal. That's an easy answer for me. I am the climate champion in the 6th CD. I was endorsed by the Oregon League of Conservation Voters, the League of Conservation Voters Action Fund. I have been serving as a climate champion since I worked for Congresswoman Hooley and moved on to serve as the lead advocate of the Oregon Environmental Council. I know what we have done, the work that we have done around energy conservation. We have been on the forefront of renewables. I tried to get an offshore wind project pulling in a Boston capitalist to bring some investment to the southern coast of Oregon. We didn't get that project done, but Oregon has some of the best wind, not just in the nation, but in the world. We can do sequestration through sustainable agriculture and forest practices. And then finally, we really need to be looking at our land use and transportation policies to make sure that those also dovetail with whatever clean new energy world we live in. This is a big piece for Oregon. Oregon, again, is at the forefront of land use planning and how we treat metropolitan areas and our transportation planning. We can do this nationwide. I think our rural economies depend on this as much as our urban economies do. I've been working with folks like Renewable Northwest, Climate Solutions, Sierra Club, OAC, and the other 40 members of the Oregon Conservation Network, in addition to our utilities and those who provide the energy sources. I am so excited to get to Congress and continue this work because I think Oregon truly is at the forefront and we'll be able to take a lot of this work and share it with the rest of the country.
Thank you. And Cody, could you conclude this answer for us?
Sorry, my dog's trying to climb into my lap. It's too long without attention, I think. The reality is that climate change is a global problem, and any solutions that we talk about have to be with an eye towards a global solution. And I think that starts with setting the example for the world. The reality is that we're not going to move away from carbon fuels anytime soon, but we can be making the investments today that will pay dividends 20, 30, 50 years from now, so that in 50 years, we're looking back at the internal combustion engine the way we look back at the horse and buggy today. And that starts with investment in all of the technologies that are necessary to transition into a green energy economy. Batteries, wind, solar, geothermal, nuclear, everything is on the table as far as I'm concerned. The world that I envision is a massively distributed, interconnected power grid. We need to be investing in smart grid technology where every home is its own power station and storage facility with batteries and solar panels, wind power. However it's created, it needs to be stored and it needs to be shared amongst buildings and homes so that we can start to, is that 15 seconds? Sorry. So that we can get away from carbon-based fuels, so that we can have the future that where we slowly turn the tide of these devastating effects of climate change.
Thank you. Okay, we've had 7 questions, and if you watched every one of our 7 candidates, each got to answer one of them first. A little bit for our viewing audience about how we went about this. Many people have sent in possible questions, and the hosts and sponsors have provided me with those pages and pages of lists. So I looked at what issues people were interested in and wrote some questions and tried to draw on all of those. And then in terms of having people answer them, kind of looking at the area, I made sure that of the first 7 questions, each of our candidates occupied each position. You were first or second or third or fourth, rotated around a little bit. And I tried as much as I could to see to it that it was your turn to have the first question, that I gave you something that goes along with what your issues are and what you've done, such as climate change or member of the congressional staff having a rural background or healthcare or immigration background. And so that's to some extent explained the logic of who went first on which issue. We have one more question, and this is one that is actually for me. I guess I get the prerogative of asking one question that is not necessarily brought in. So being as how I am a retired political science professor, and I used to teach a class in constitutional law, I thought I'd come up with one that is a little bit hypothetical, but it could be real. But as for the order of speech, this is because everybody's had a chance to go first, I used a very scientific method. I simply took a deck of cards, shuffled them up, dealt 7 cards out, and picked them up. And anyway, Cody is the ace of spades. So, Cody, you get to go first. And here's your question. In recent years, Republican-controlled state legislatures have asked Congress to hold a convention for drafting a constitutional amendment requiring a balanced federal budget. Congress can determine the agenda for such a convention. If Congress were to convene one, what changes either by addition, revision, or removal, would you like to see in the Constitution? Cody?
Well, I think we can start with the amendment that's been pending for 30 years, where everybody is guaranteed equal rights under the law. That includes, I mean, that's everybody. Let's start with the Equal Rights Amendment. But building on that, with regards to a balanced budget amendment, I think a balanced budget amendment is, in theory, stupid, to be short, because the government needs the flexibility to spend when it needs to spend to solve the problems as they arise. What I would really like to see is policy put into place where every year, as taxpayers file their taxes, they are allowed to designate where their tax dollars go so that people feel like they have ownership of their government and ownership of their tax dollars. People, being people, they'll allocate to their pet issues. But I think on the aggregate, I think we will be able to decipher the priorities of the American people more readily than just asking them. And then, lots of people are lazy or just don't have time. People are struggling to just get by these days. So they could designate their tax dollars to be allocated to various policy groups, somebody who they feel and trust represents their values. I think that is how we get a hold of this idea of a balanced budget.
Thank you. Teresa, let's hear from you.
Can you repeat the question again, please?
Yes. In recent years, Republican-controlled state legislatures have asked Congress to hold a convention for drafting a constitutional amendment requiring a balanced federal budget. However, Congress can determine the agenda for such a convention. So here's the main part of the question. If Congress were to convene a convention, what changes, either by addition, revision, or removal, would you like to see in the Constitution?
So that's a really good question. I often think about how the Constitution, who was written by, and how it applies to everybody in this country, or if it doesn't. I think about how inclusive the Constitution has been and how we've had to work really hard to make adjustments to the Constitution throughout our history. I don't have any suggestions to change or modify the Constitution at this point, but certainly one of the areas that is of interest of mine is around voting rights. It took, in history, we didn't have voting rights. Folks of color didn't have voting rights at the same time, or women for that matter. Right now we are even struggling with passing voting right laws to make it possible for everybody in this country to make voting accessible. There's some states in this country who are trying to pass voter suppression laws, which I think are not right. And so this is something that the federal government absolutely needs to pass to ensure that that we are all involved in democracy. Another area that I think is important in respect to voting rights is to ensure that we have language access. So everybody in this country who is a citizen and has the ability to vote can read in their native language who is running, who they should vote for. And I do like this idea of making it a holiday, so people don't have to go to work and don't have to travel miles and miles, or because of lack of transportation, they can't vote. So that is probably an area that is an interest of mine. And I know changing the Constitution, it takes a lot of energy and time, and and a lot of work. And but I would say that that's an area of focus that's of interest of mine. Thank you.
Thank you. Loretta, want to take that question?
Yes, I want to piggyback on what Representative Alonzo Leon just said. The 10th Amendment, which is states' rights, and the 14th Amendment, which is equal rights under the law, they're always having a fight with one another. States are putting out, 38 states, as a matter of fact, voter suppression laws. And if we're really true about the Constitution and following the Constitution, it's breaking the individual protection under the law. So for us to think about this is ridiculous. The Republicans, they need to deal with the issues that are at hand. They need to deal with this Voting Rights Act, because if you mess around and put that in there, you're going to put the Social Security Administration at risk. The Social Security Trust, it lends money to other government agencies. So if you put a balanced budget amendment in, it is going to mess up older people. It is possibly bankrupt them if that's what needs to happen. We have all kind of economic crisis that happen in a year that we have to deal with, just like this Ukraine issue that we're putting sanctions on, and it's having a negative impact on the everyday person. And so gas and groceries are higher. Bread is going to be higher. Russia, they're responsible for the wheat that comes into the United States, and to add an extra layer for a constitutional amendment is going to cause all kind of havoc with just everyday people. So no, that's not the way to go. We need to deal with the issue at hand. We need to pass the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, and we need to stop having this fight between states' rights and individual rights, because as the states are writing laws, they are directly impacting the for everyone to have the right to have their rights under the 14th Amendment, equal rights under the law.
Thank you. Matt West.
Oh man, I have a lot of ideas on ways that we could improve our current system, for sure. First would be the Equal Rights Amendment. It is abhorrent that it's yet to be passed, and in many ways, that's why we're seeing continued assaults on women's health to this day. We absolutely need to work on Senate reform, make the chamber more reflective of the nation, abolish the filibuster, first and foremost. We need to work on electoral reform in general. The Electoral College is an interesting vestigial aspect of our original form of government, and I believe that we need to move towards a direct election for the presidency. I believe we need to have the right to vote enshrined in the Constitution as an inalienable right to all citizens. We need to also work on court reform. We need to work on expanding the Supreme Court in order to make sure that we have fewer of these fights every time somebody new is appointed to the bench. You have rotating justices, for example. There are so many things that we could change in this sort of situation where we're essentially writing an entirely new constitution. I believe that part of our original idea of government was to work towards a more perfect union, always improving upon what came before us. And I think that this would be a perfect opportunity to move forward into realizing the real benefits that could be had if we were really to fight and aim high.
Thank you. Kathleen Harder.
Thank you. Back at the Constitutional Convention, when Ben Franklin came out of that building, he was asked, what sort of government are we going to have? And he said, a democracy, if you can keep it. And I'm very concerned that we're at that tipping point right now. Can we keep this democracy? So the number one thing that we need to do is to enshrine our voting rights. Look at Texas, for example. It has one of the most restrictive voting laws in the country, and they actually now have a law that there's only one voting drop box per county. Think of Harris County, Texas, where there's 4.7 million people and there's one voter drop box. That's the sort of threat that's going on right now. So we must enshrine voter rights. Secondly, women's rights are inalienable rights. That includes women's reproductive rights, and that needs to be absolutely part of what our Constitution is about. And then lastly, we need to look at campaign finance reform because our democracy is at risk. Our democracy cannot be bought. So we have to be sure that that can't happen. And those are probably the most important things. But when it comes right down to it, our democracy is at risk right now. So if we were to have a constitutional convention, that's what we should all be focusing on.
Thank you. Kerry Flynn.
I actually really like the gist of everyone's answer. I think that focusing on voting rights in various forms is very sensible. I think it's clearly an area where the system's leading to underrepresentation of groups, like systematically leading to underrepresentation of groups. And it would be really good if you could get a more diverse Congress and Senate and just generally in the elections. I don't know which these are. I have friends who are into these things like the approval or ranked choice voting, which I'll tell you all the great characteristics of, but I do know they create more diverse groups. And so in some ways allow for more representation of voters' preferences. And obviously, like, you should actually be allowed to vote. We should just do mail vote everywhere. It's clearly a better system, vote by mail, or you should keep proselytizing. I also like obviously the Equal Rights Amendment, but I think maybe just actually enshrining the right to choose instead of like risking it would be a really important move. I think this is something that keeps teetering on the edge, and it's way too important to let it be something that can just swing with the Supreme Court justices. Finally, I will say that I think that a balanced budget deficit is more of a superstition thing than something an economist would back. This is also based on my understanding of like surveys of economists, as well as my undergraduate level understanding of economics, such that like you do actually want to be able to, like during the COVID, supply a lot more money. And also it seems to be the case that the deficit doesn't have that bad an effect, except for the interest payments on the economy more generally. So I would oppose that.
Thank you. And Andrea?
Thank you. So I agree with the candidates here that access to the ballot is critical, and we are, I believe, on the precipice of losing our democracy because of this question. So I think that we do need to standardize it. And I think Oregon has done a marvelous job since the 90s of doing vote by mail. It's easy to vote and hard to cheat. And we've been moving further and further to making sure that we have even further access with, paid postage. And now it's, as long as it's dated on that postage date, you have an additional week, as long as it gets into the clerk. So I think we're a great model for that. And I've been a champion of those types of pieces of legislation. I was a champion of campaign finance reform as well. We didn't get it passed last session, but this needs to be done nationwide. People don't really feel like they are part of the process when they feel like these elections can be bought. I know the popular vote and how the presidential election is counted is really important to Oregonians. This is something that, as a legislator, I've been encouraged to support. Finally, we need to enshrine access to abortion, just as we did in 2017 under the Reproductive Health Equity Act here in Oregon, where I was the lead advocate. This is something that states across the nation are doing right now to make sure that post-Roe, that their communities and women in their states have that access. I have heard from women all over the state that are fearful, but again, we passed it in 2017, and I know folks across the nation, I think folks in Texas, folks in Idaho are going to wish that they had done the same.
Thank you. Well, that's all the questions we have. At this point, we're going to move on to the final feature of tonight, and that is for each of the candidates to take 2 minutes as a sort of final remarks. And we'll just do this in the reverse order that we have the last set of questions. So we'll have Andrea lead off.
Well, thank you. And thank you for having us tonight. Thank you for all the community that has come out tonight to support all of us. It's been a great evening to spend with all of you. So what I would say is that I have been a leader on a lot of the topics that we have talked about tonight. I don't just hold progressive values, I actually deliver progressive results for Oregonians. As a state legislator, I have championed issues around the environment, around healthcare and reproductive health, and around working families and the things that they need. So I feel like I have the experience both at the federal level as an advocate, at the state level, to return to Congress now as that member of Congress, knowing how to implement the policies, how to bring people together, how to work in coalition, and actually finally deliver for people who are in need right now. So I'm really excited to be the next member of Congress from the 6th District.
Thank you. Terry Quinn.
Thank you. I think it's obvious from my career that the only thing I really care about is service to others. I will fight to build a healthy, prosperous, and stable Oregon. Now, stability means good jobs that you can support a family with, and jobs that don't require a college degree. I worked on legislation with Congress to bring exactly these sorts of jobs in computer chip manufacturing to Oregon. Stability also means working to combat and prevent disasters like pandemics and wildfires. I lived through a natural disaster as a child when we did not have the ability to handle it. And I don't want any other child in Oregon to ever have to go through something like I did. We all just lived through COVID. Now, my work on pandemic prevention, helping craft Biden's pandemic prevention plan, was motivated by a desire to make sure that this is the last pandemic we ever experience. Stability also means protecting Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid, and making sure seniors have the security they earned and paid for. Stability means being able to visit your grandparents and your family without fear of getting sick. And this is what we all deserve. This is the Oregon that I will work for and serve. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's hear from Kathleen Harder.
Thank you. I am very worried about the fragile state of our democracy and frustrated about the lack of meaningful progress on the big problems that are facing us, from healthcare to homelessness, to the crisis in our schools, to climate change. I'm the best candidate because I'm a part of this district. I'm the only one who has lived and worked and raised a family here. And I'm proud to say that I can cast a vote for myself. So as my husband can and my son can, because we live in this district. I understand the needs of the people of this district. I've taken care of thousands of them as patients. They're my coworkers, they're my neighbors, and they're my friends. I work in one of the busiest ERs and hospitals on the West Coast. I've been a small business owner or a partner in a small business my entire life. I understand the challenges that are facing small business. Outside of my career, I've worked in the school district, I've volunteered in free clinics, I've advocated for women's reproductive rights at the legislature, and I protected patients of the state in the state on the Oregon Medical Board. I'm proud to have the endorsements of people who also serve here in the district. 3 Salem City Councilors, the Mayor of Salem, State Representative Evans, and former Representative Brian Clem. Matter of fact, the Mayor of Independence just put one of my campaign signs in his front yard. They all know that I will fight for the people of this district. And they also know I'm the only Democrat that can win this seat in the general election. My donors are 81% in state, over 46% in Salem, in the heart of this district. I believe in servant leadership. That's not a career politician thing to say. What you do is you have a job or a career, then you go and serve your district in the legislature, and then you come back and you have to face your neighbors, look them in the eye and let them know what you did for them. I really think the thing that sets me apart more than anything is what I do all day long is deal with complex problems and come up with pragmatic solutions and ways to get things done. We don't have time for politics as usual. The American people need to get some wins. That's the only way to build back trust in government. Everyone has a choice to make here, and I hope to get your support.
Thank you. Matt West.
Yep. Thank you all for being here so much. This is an incredibly important election. Thank you for the audience for being here and listening to us go on for quite some time. Thank you to the moderators. This is a very important election, like I just said. This district is my home and its needs have not been met. Whether we're talking about infrastructure investment in Eastern Washington County, whether we're talking about water rights in Yamhill Polk, this district is full of people who are feeling like they haven't had their needs met. And this is the first opportunity for them to have a representative all of their own and have their own voice in Congress. And I'm extremely excited to be that person for them. Nobody represents this district. We absolutely will need to do what needs to be done. That is to tax the rich and save the planet. This community and really our whole country has the ability and to really move the needle, to really make like impressive progress and change when we all work together and we realize that the common good is everyone's good in this matter. I know how important, we need a fighter. I know how important unions are. I fought to unionize my fellow colleagues at Intel. I still am ongoing with that fight. And I believe that that is the sort of representative that this district needs. Somebody who will fight for the interests of the people of this district, who will fight for their home, who will not back down, who will not let our democracy go quietly into the night, as it were. This is our moment. And I'm very proud and honored by the ability to be up here and speak to you all. Please go to my website, www.mattwestforcongress.com. Please learn more about my campaign. Truly, thank you all so much.
Thank you. And let's hear the closing remarks of Loretta Smith.
Thank you, Dr. Dover, for moderating this forum this evening. It's very much needed. And as a third generation Oregonian, graduate of Oregon State University, single mother, a former staffer for the same senator and the same congressman for 21 years. No one has served in a capacity as a staffer and worked longer than I have. Experience matters, representation matters. And I think, as I look at this forum, and we really started getting to some real issues towards the end. And a few things, we were not asked any questions about Ukraine, housing, or even dark money. But a couple of things that we need to do. We need to make sure that campaign finance reform is on the table, because I think it's very disingenuous of Carrick to say he wants more diversity in the Congress when he very well saw 3 capable women and 2 women of color already in the race before he jumped in. And if you truly believe that, then you need to let the women have at it and go head up. And we need to figure out how to stop so much dark money coming in for a candidate who has not even lived here, hasn't lived here since 2008. It is just so frustrating for me to go through this whole thing and listen to all these answers, but we know we have a group of men who have lots of money. They've written themselves checks. This seat will not be bought. And I'm saying that to all of you who have written $1 million checks to yourselves. This seat will not be bought. That's why we need someone in Congress who has been there before, who understands it, who gets it, who understands the meaning of, what January 6th what it really means. Some people in Congress right now, they believe that January 6th did not happen. It's not only just January 6th. What's happening here with this Oregon CD6 race, it's criminal. The amount of dark money that is coming into this race, that's what y'all need to be talking about. Y'all need to be talking about that and quit skirting around the issue here. It's ridiculous.
And Teresa, let's hear from you for your closing remarks.
Thank you. As a daughter of farm workers and as an Indigenous Latina immigrant who grew up in this community, I took on many roles and responsibilities in my family, which helped me grow up fast. As the oldest of 5, I was the interpreter and translator, and sometimes the connector to the broader community. At a very young age, I saw and experienced a lot of injustice, such as racism, house insecurity, fear of immigration, food insecurity, and feeling helpless. I remember one summer when I was in middle school, I was on a berry patch. The sun was pounding on my head. My hands were red from the melted berries. I was exhausted, and my back ached from being hunched over all day. I told myself that it wouldn't always be this way, meaning I wouldn't always work in the fields. I started to think about my teachers who helped me believe I was college material. Their words gave me hope and determination. These experiences of injustice and going without because your family lived in poverty are not just my own. It's what many people experience in my district right now. I got my GED, earned a BA and a master's degree. Further, I became a citizen of this country. I did all these things because I felt I needed to do to prepare myself to help our communities. While I worked in education for 20 years in different capacities, people in my district had other plans for me. They encouraged me to become a city council member, a state legislator, and now they believe I should be their next congressional leader. I consider myself a public servant who loves her community deeply and works so hard to make sure their lives are better. I do not want a child or a family to experience what my family experienced, but do want people to know that these families exist. It is why I'm so passionate about making sure that their voices are heard in the halls of the Capitol building. I also help create a system to ensure that members of our non-English speaking communities had a way to communicate. So we became a language access building. And that would not happen if it wasn't for people like me. In my 3 terms as a legislator, I have helped pass progressive laws that I believe are transformational for the communities that I serve. My lived experiences mirror the communities who live in CD6. And I want to bring my experiences and the voices of our communities to Congress. Choosing me for Congress would mean that people with my lived experiences are just as important and deserve to be seen and heard in Congress. Thank you.
Thank you. And we'll hear from Cody Reynolds to conclude our evening.
I ran for Congress the first time 10 years ago, and a lot of you in Washington County had your chance then to vote for me, and some of you did, and I want to thank you for that vote. But what I learned in 2012, what we all know to be true, is that money wins elections. And there's multiple ways to go about getting that. I had multiple conversations with people. They told me, we like your values. We think you would make a great representative. Set your sights lower, pay your dues, wait your turn. Those are not things that I have ever accepted in life. So I decided to do it a different way. I didn't have much money in 2012, but I said, Oregon is going to pick up a seat in the 2020 census. I'm going to win that seat. What do I need to do it? I need to make the money to run for this office to win that seat. I'm not buying this seat. I'm going to win this seat because I want to represent the people of Oregon. There are a lot of people running for office right now who have questionable loyalties. My only loyalty is to the people of Oregon. And those are the only loyalties I will ever have in Congress, because I will never accept the support of dark money, of political action committees, of special interests. It angers me to think that our political system is for sale, because the reality is it is. And I'm not going to be that person who's for sale. I will represent you. I will represent your interests, and I will do it to the best of my ability, because I am fully capable of representing the people of Oregon. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I can hardly wait until November, because I'm going to cast a very enthusiastic ballot for the first Democratic representative of Congressional District 6. We have 7 fine candidates to choose from. Every one of these people will make wonderful members of Congress. I think we should be very proud of them. I'd like to thank all of them for willing to offer their views and their inspiration and their goals for what they intend to do. Also, I would like to thank our sponsors, and particularly the Washington County Democrats, for making this possible. Thank you and good evening.